There's a tiny kingdom not too far away, and the rain on the plastering just watch it melt away. Stupid stars, they've been in my eyes too long. Watch it melt away. And they say, stupid stars, stupid stars. Okay, good evening. I didn't have a opening video to share, so that's just a piece of a video of a cover song I did. That song is called Tiny Kingdom, and it's by the band Meat Puppets. I've used their music before. They tend to believe that the land of mushrooms is also the land of fairies and pixies, and they call it the Tiny Kingdom. So, we have tonight for you more about fungi, and tonight and next week you're going to learn a whole bunch more beyond what we had in our March presentation on mushrooms, and I think you're going to be surprised about some of the information that pops up. Probably not, well, some this week, but definitely a lot more next week. So we're going to go ahead and jump into this, unless, Christy, you have anything to bring up before we start? Nope. Okay, I will go ahead and start sharing the presentation. Wish there was a way to not have to do this every time, but okay, so more about fungi, part 1. And there is a reason that we are saying fungi and not mushrooms, which we will get into. And most of the information in this program was provided by a man named Curtis Young, who is an extension educator from the agriculture and natural resources department for Van Wert County to the west of us. And the photos were either my photos or taken from free stock on Pinterest, just to clarify, throw that out there. So, wanted to cover basic anatomy again, even though we covered that in the program in March, because there are some things that need to be recovered about this or covered in more depth. And from top to bottom, on your average mushroom, we have the cap, which, as you see here, two different versions. The larger one on the larger mushroom is the mature cap. And then the button that a lot of us are familiar with on the smaller mushroom, that button, that's when they are in the immature state. So when you see the button mushrooms for sale in the store, those are actually immature mushrooms. And then we have the stem, and then that frilly piece in the middle is called the veil. And the veil actually has a purpose, which we will talk about in a little bit here. And then we have the cup, which tops off the root or the rhizome. And mushrooms either have a root or a rhizome. Some have one, some have the other. And we will get into that as well. Any questions before we go on? Okay, good. Now, in case you don't know, there is a difference between a rhizome and a root.
Mm-hmm.
A root goes down into the ground and it anchors the plant, and it is basically a vascular organ which seeks out water and nutrients and provides that to the rest of the plant. That's its sole function. A rhizome, however, is a little different. A rhizome does not drill down deep into the ground like a root on a tree or a shrub, or in our example here, a carrot. The rhizome stays near the surface. They typically grow horizontally, and shoots come out of them. Some of the shoots go down into the soil to find nutrients and water. Some of the shoots that come out of it, though, they go vertical, and they come up out of the ground to create new plant stems. And they also travel underground horizontally to create new rhizomes. This is how they spread. And because of that, rhizomes, which are also known as corms, C-O-R-M. You may have heard the term corms. Corms and rhizomes are basically the same thing. They can be split. They can be broken in two, cut in two to grow new plants. They have that characteristic which roots do not. So that is the difference. Any questions on that? Maybe a lot of you were already aware of that. Okay, so, and the reason I bring this up now is some mushrooms, some fungi have roots, some have rhizomes.
There we go. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Any questions? Nope. Okay. So we have various cap shapes. Um, there are many different kinds, as you will see as we go on through the presentation, and these are the 10 main ones, although there are some more, but these are the primary ones. And you will see this in some examples that we are going to go through. They relate to various different types of fungi. Now, fungi are all different in terms of gills or not gills. Some, as you see on the left, and we're all familiar with this, have gills. Some have pores instead of gills, and we're going to go into this in detail. Some, like the shelf mushroom we see, or shelf fungi, excuse me, that we see here on the left, they have false gills. They have on the underneath what looks like gills, and they are not gills. On the bottom there, that's another example of false gills, or what's considered false gills. And in the middle, these are the very well known morels, or morels. I've heard it pronounced two different ways. They have the pits that are all over the cap. And then there are some on the far right, uh, like these um, that are called coral fungi that have what are actually considered false pits. And the difference there is these false pits typically go, they're typically completely hollow. They go completely through the fungi. They're not like a little mini cave like what you have on the morels. Now the big difference here, gills versus pores, and there is a very big difference with pores. The function of a pore is these pores, and if I can actually, let me go back. A mushroom like this one in the middle that has pores, rather than the gills, these slats, these slits, it has thousands of these holes on the surface underneath. Can everybody see that?
Now I can, yeah.
Everybody see the little dots? Those are the pores. Each pore holds spores. It's a tube that goes up inside the cap, and it holds spores. Now the thing about this is a gill, which is kind of like I don't know what you would consider it. It's like a vent. It's an opening. They call it a gill because it most resembles a gill on a fish. hopefully you can see the difference here. A gill with that opening at the bottom is able to hold a lot more spores than what a pore is. A pore can't hold as many spores as what a gill does.
Hmm.
So to go back, because a gill holds a lot more spores, it doesn't have to, the fungi doesn't have to have as many gills. To make up the difference, a fungi that has pores has to have thousands and thousands of pores to hold as many spores as what a fungi with maybe 80 or 90 gills has. Does that make sense? The fungi with pores has thousands of pores because it's trying to make up for having not having the capacity that the gills have for holding spores. Does that make sense? Anybody have a question on that? It's just the difference in the way they are created. So now scientists study fungi propagation in part by examining their spores. They make slides of spores, and they start in doing this by making something called spore prints. And what you see here are this is something that is, from what I understand, very difficult to do. These are two photographs of fungi actually releasing their spores. The things you see there that maybe look like light beams or maybe look like water falling off of them, that's the fungi releasing their spores, and the spores projecting away from the caps. And this brings us to the veil. And you really can't see it in this photo, but this fungi right here, the veil is right here. And what it is doing, it is for the spores that are in the gills closer to the stem. As those get released, the veil is causing them to project outward away from the stem instead of dropping right at the bottom of the stem and around the stem. It forces them away from the fungi. So it's kind of like when you're standing under an umbrella, the rain is pushed out away from your body. That's what the veil does. The veil causes those spores to spread out away from the stem because the fungi is not going to spread with having a lot of the spores dropping right down around its stem. It needs them to spread out, especially if there's not very much wind. And now, you look at this photo on the right, you see the spores really spreading to the right of the fungi, and that's because there's a breeze, there's a wind spreading them away, spreading them out. But here they're pretty much dropping almost straight down. There's very little breeze, if any, and that's where the veil comes in. Does that make sense? Anybody have any questions on that? Okay, so now I'm going to attempt a spore print demonstration. I don't know how successful I will be with actually getting spores to show you, but I can at least show you how this is done. So I'm going to stop screen share at this point. And I'm not totally sure how I'm going to do this. The way this is done is the scientists use a box, and I've got a small one for our purposes. I think I'm going to have to take my background off here. In fact, I know I will. So you can see this. And okay. So I've got just a small craft box here. They use a wooden box like this, and it's, as you can see, it's shallow. And they put, and I'm not an expert, so this is kind of trial by error. They put colored paper in the bottom of the box. And since they are experts, I am not, they know what color the spores are on the different fungi, so they know what color paper to use best to make the spores show up. So I've got a piece of dark blue paper and I've got a piece of yellow paper. And the thing about this that's going to be trial by error with this is this right now is not the time of year to be looking in the wild for fungi. The growing season, and I'm jumping into next week's presentation a little bit, the growing season for almost all fungi is typically April through October. Pretty much, and I could be wrong because we're having such unseasonably warm weather right now. Typically, growing season for all the species ends in October. So what I had to do was I had to go to the store and get the freshest mushrooms they had. I went to Cam Asian Market yesterday, and what I did, and I don't know if this is going to work or not. What I did was I got some very fresh oyster mushrooms, and I picked these oyster mushrooms for this because they have very long, very large gills, as you can see. I'm hoping that those gills are holding spores. I have no idea whether they actually are or not, but I can at least show you how this is done. So what they do, I'm going to back up some here. What they do is they take the box, and I'm going to kind of hold this at the bottom of the screen, and they take the mushroom, the fungi, and they hold it up like this and drop it into the box. And they will do that several times. And if the spores are in there, they will shake out. And now the thing about this is, since I don't know what color the spores are on an oyster mushroom, I don't know if they're going to show up better with the yellow paper or the blue paper. And it's difficult without having my microscope out. And you won't be able to see this, but I am seeing, maybe you can see it, I am seeing some very dark flecks in there on the paper. So I've got that, and just for the heck of it, I'm going to lift that out of there, and I'm going to try another one with the yellow paper to see if that makes any difference. And I'm going to take a different oyster mushroom, and as you can see, this one's got a lot of big gills on it also. And I'm going to do this again. We'll see if this comes out any different. Drop this handful of times here. Yeah, I'll do this a couple more times. Oops. The yellow paper seemed to work better. As you can see, see all the black marks? All the black patterns on there. The dark, that's all spores on there. And what the people that are doing the researching would do is transfer that to slides. Whoops. They would transfer that to slides to study the spores under the microscope. So it worked for these oyster mushrooms, it worked a lot better with the lighter color paper. Not bad, right? What I will do for next week, I'm going to try and transfer some of those myself onto microscope slides, and I have my electronic microscope, and I can throw those images actually onto the computer to show you all for next week. So now I'm going to go back to screen sharing. We'll go back to the presentation here. Okay, we're going to go. There we go. Okay. Everybody see it? Right back where we left off. Okay, so now here are the different types of fungi, and I never thought about there being specific different species, but there are, and there's a bunch of them. And we're going to talk about some of these in detail next week, but here's the rundown. We have shelf fungi. We have bracket fungi. The two of them look very similar, and we will go into quite a bit of detail about those two next week, because there are some specific differences. We have ball-shaped, which are on the left there, and we have puffballs. Everybody's familiar with those, right? And then we have the giant puffball. And when I say giant puffball, I mean giant puffball.
Wow.
Yeah, wow. Huge. And then we have the spiny puffball. And that's, an actual size photo on the right, and that's a close up on the left. Spiny puffball. And then the morels that everybody's familiar with, or morels, however you pronounce it. And then we have cup shaped. These on the left are the Carolina orange cups. The ones on the right, these are very unusual. These are called false chicken's nest. False chicken's nest because they look like a bird's nest with eggs in them. I don't know where the chicken part comes in, but that's what they're called. And they have a few other names as well, but that seems to be like the most common name for them. We have, as I mentioned earlier, we have the coral fungus. And actually, I mentioned that Asian market, and I'm in there somewhat regularly, and they sell quite a bit of these coral. And then you have, as I mentioned much earlier, the sponge fungus, which have the false pits. We have the club fungi. Should be obvious why they got that name. Next, we have the stinkhorns. I don't know how familiar people are with these. There are a handful of different stinkhorns. This one happens to be the one that is named the Devil's Dipstick. And these are very unusual because all of the stinkhorns have one thing in common. They all have a life cycle that involves them starting to come up out of the ground in the early morning, and they reach their full height, pretty much what you see here, by early afternoon, and by late afternoon they are dead, and by the time about 6 o'clock or so in the evening rolls around, they have completely deteriorated. You would not even know they had ever been there. So very short, fast life cycle. Most of them do have some orange coloring to them. And that's the stinkhorns.
Do they stink?
Some have an odor, yes. Especially if they're cut or stepped on, some have an odor, and that's where they get the name. But they do not all. And then we have the jellies. The jellies, well, just like they look here, and they do. They vary. Some of them feel kind of like gummies, but some of them are also very, very sticky and gooey. When they're touched, they just completely come apart, and they're very, almost like glue. They're very gooey, very watery, and they range between opaque, like the ones you see on the left here, all the way to some of them are completely clear, completely see-through. You can see the outlines like you do the ones on the right here, but they're completely clear. And that's the jellies. Didn't know there were that many, did you?
Mm-mm.
And then we have ones that are called lacquers, most of which are not in the United States. We only have one that is in the United States, and that is Tramides, that is shown here. Looks kind of like a pancake almost. It's the only one in this country. They are people like to get them as an ornamental, raise them as an ornamental. They are also an organic, which means they can be eaten, and they are also used for medicinal purposes. Some laboratories raise them as a component in medicines, believe it or not. The main one being there is something within them that is used in cancer fighting drugs. The other one that is the most prevalent is found in Russia, and it's shown here, and it is the Ganoderma lucidum, and it is also used there in Europe for medicinal purposes. It's used to make certain types of medicines, and it is also has culinary uses. They are also eaten, and those are called lacquers. And that is because, unlike any of the other funguses except for the jellies, they have this very, and you can see it here definitely on the one on the right, they have this very shiny outer appearance that makes it look like they've been coated with lacquer or coated with varnish. And that's where they get that overall general term of being lacquers. So that is all of the general types. Does anybody have any questions on any of those? And again, I'm going to go back here. And I'm just going to, just as a little preview for next week, we started with, and everybody's seen these, shelves and brackets. They look very similar, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is a whole world of difference between these.
Hmm.
And there is a whole world of difference between these and every other type of fungus. You're going to be very, very surprised about what is involved in these two fungi and what makes them so special. And some of it's very simple and you wouldn't even think of it. So we'll be taking a deep dive into shelves and brackets next week. So that is the end of the presentation, and we have this weird guy. You know what they say about mushrooms, right?
Mm-mm.
Or what a lot of people, what your average worker says when they're asked about something.
keep you in the dark and feed
Yep.
you.
Yep. Yep. They say I don't know. We're like mushrooms. They keep us in the dark and feed us manure. Okay. Let's stop share.
I never ever heard that saying before.
No. Oh, I've heard it plenty of times. Since I used to be a supervisor, I heard it all the time. Okay, so anybody have any questions or any comments or anything they'd like to bring up about that? I don't know how surprising it is to any of you, but it was very surprising to me when I sat through that gentleman's presentation about all of I never, I mean, you see them, but you never really think about those are all different types of fungi, and they're all different species. I guess you look at those things and you don't really think of them as species. At least I never did. They're just you think of them as they're all mushrooms. Well, they're not, as it turns out, and you'll find out next week, they're not all mushrooms.
So I take it that a mushroom is a type of fungi,
Yeah.
and fungi is the overarching category.
Well, yeah. And I'm not going to spoil it for next week, but yes, there is a difference between a fungi and a mushroom. They are all fungi, but there is a difference between a fungi and a mushroom. And we'll definitely get into that next week.
I just started watching a little bit of that movie link that I had sent you, Dawn.
Yeah.
And it opens up with saying mushrooms are not really vegetables, but they're
No.
not really animals, but they're somewhere in between.
Yeah.
I haven't gone beyond that, but that's very intriguing.
Well, they're definitely not plants. Even though some of them have roots and some have rhizomes, they're really not, they're not plants because they're not vascular. And even though the spores act as seeds, they're not seeds. They are little. The spores are bacterial. They're bacterium. They're not seeds, and there's a big difference. Even though they cause new fungi to grow, they're not seeds, and it really comes down to the fact that fungi are not, they're not vascular. Plants are vascular. They have the the system of tubercles running through them that sends the nutrients and the water through the whole plant and enables them to photosynthesize. And fungi don't photosynthesize.
I used to have an old telephone pole on the ground that every spring and early summer I knew them as Canadian soldiers. They'd pop up, and it was some kind of fungi, I guess. Certainly wasn't a mushroom, but they were the cutest little things because they were red, and there was a whole kind of area of that telephone pole that always produced these things for a number of years.
Hmm.
Huh. Yeah, I'm looking that up right now to see what that might be.
I
Let's.
don't know it by any other name, and I don't know how I came upon that name exactly, because actually I was fascinated with them when I was a kid, much younger.
Wow.
There it is.
Oh,
It's
really?
it's it's orange, and it almost looks like a chrysanthemum.
Wow.
It's deep orange with lighter orange, almost yellowish edges. And it almost looks like chrysanthemum.
Do you have a picture?
I've got it on my phone. Yeah.
Can you hold it up to the screen? See if we
Yeah.
can see it.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Is that
I
it?
can't see it.
That it, Glenna?
No, I can't see it.
Oh, I can't see it either. I can.
Yeah, I could too. Hold it back up,
Enable
Don.
enable your video, Glenna, and you'll probably be
No,
able to.
now
Now
I
I
see it.
can see it.
No, somebody's little person keeps popping up here, and I don't know if it's.
I've sure never seen one like that. It's really interesting. Huh. It
Well, what I
shows.
think is interesting is people can grow fungi also
Yeah.
on our skin and in our bodies.
Here's
You can have
another
fungal infections.
photo of that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because they're bacterial based.
My oldest daughter's Yorkie poo has a fungus on his stomach. And he's had it since he was a puppy, and his skin is black. And they finally found an antifungal that works. And he's grown all of his hair back there, and his skin is no longer black. It's crazy.
Hmm.
Well, if you've ever had athlete's foot, that's fungus.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Never had it.
Yeah.
A lot of people get it under their toenails too,
Yeah.
and sometimes fingernails for that matter. Well, I just got over one in my esophagus that I didn't even know I had until I had an upper GI.
Hmm. Yeah, now see if you look at a definition of fungi, it says that they are a species of organisms in the kingdom of fungi, and they include species in that kingdom include yeasts, rusts, mildews, molds, and mushrooms.
Oh.
Also includes slime molds and water molds. So that's a lot of different species one under one kingdom. So yeah, and I've got a lot more to tell you about them next week. A lot more. I don't want to give too much away, not any more than I already have, but you're you're going to be very surprised by what I have to tell you and show you next week as we go on in this program. And then not sure what we're going to do the week after, whether we're going to do Christy's program or if we're going to do something else. How many? I want to ask how many people watched the virtual hike?
I did.
I did.
I watched it today.
Yeah, what did you think?
I thought it was good.
Yeah, what? Let me ask you this: how did you watch it? What did you use to watch it?
I put mine on my TV.
Oh, did you? How was that?
I really liked it. I
Yeah,
I do that a lot with these hiking groups because it's my way of traveling.
yeah. I actually, I think, and I'm gonna stop recording.